Welcome back to World's News, where we present you the most important and funniest news from today, the past 2 weeks. Now, I want to take a moment to apologize that we didn't upload a video last week. On Twitter, we said that there wouldn't be a video last Sunday, but since some people don't have Twitter, we'll also tell you on YouTube if we won't be able to upload in time. Anyways, this week's topics are the presidential elections in France, an update for the Russo-Ukrainian war, a breakthrough in the dementia research, and Sweden and Finland will join the NATO. I hope you'll enjoy this week's news, so let's get the first topic started. The presidential elections in France. I have to admit that this isn't really from the past week. In fact, the second round of the French election was on April 24th and therefore 2 weeks ago. So here's all you need to know about this election summed up. To start, we gotta talk about how elections in France work. So, the French president is elected to a 5-year term in a 2-round election. Apart from that, the elections in France are directly democratic, meaning that the votes of the people are counted and that they decide about the outcome of that election. And if you're from Europe, or any country with direct democratic elections for that matter, you may be asking yourself how an election can be indirectly democratic. Well, in the United States, for example, the elections depend on so-called representatives, each representing the people from one district of the US. But that is another story. If you want to learn more about how the French elections work though, I recommend this video by the Financial Times, which explains their electoral system very well. Anyways, after the first round and considering public surveys, the battle really was between far-right Marine Le Pen and center-left Emmanuel Macron, who has been president for the past 5 years. And to make it short, Emmanuel Macron won the election with 58.5% of France's population on his side. On one hand, this seems great, since the far-right party didn't win the election, but on the other hand, they still got 41.5%, which isn't really great since they're the far-right party. But for now, we've got bigger problems. The Russo-Ukrainian war, an update. One of these problems remains the Russo-Ukrainian war, and it keeps delivering news on a daily basis. One of these is very concerning. After Ukrainian forces were able to evacuate some civilians from Mariupol, Russian troops started attacking the Azovstal steel plant where lost Ukrainian soldiers and civilians had sheltered for the past weeks. Now, the contact to these troops has been lost and the chances for any Ukrainian soldiers surviving this are very low. But the real question is what they will do to the civilians that are still there. I mean, looking back at all the war crimes that the Russian troops already committed, they probably wouldn't care if they just killed them as well. Another very important thing is a decision that the EU made. In one of our previous videos, I said that one way to stop this war would be an embargo of Russian gas. And that's what the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, announced. Now, before you get too excited, the EU members won't entirely stop buying Russian gas or oil, but they will reduce Russian gas imports by 2/3 by the end of 2022, and they also plan to phase out crude oil over 6 months and refined products by the end of 2022. Now, some countries are accepted from this. Slovakia, Hungary and Czech, for example, fully rely on Russian oil, so they get an extra year to find alternative suppliers or to tackle problems with pipeline capacity. Now, this embargo could really hurt the Russian economy in a way that could stop the war, since most of Russia's income is currently generated by selling gas and oil. Apart from all these economic things, Russia keeps generating new memes, like this one for example, where a Russian official is using a magnifying glass to look at something on a computer. Another hilarious thing is that the Russian state media tweeted that, quote, signs of black magic were found in Ukrainian military headquarters, quote end. And you'd think that that's a joke, but it isn't. By that, they mean this sign that apparently shows a, quote, satanic seal. The news agency RIA Novosti even claims that, quote, disciples of otherworldly forces tried to consecrate their weapons. Well, sure, most Ukrainian soldiers enchant their guns with black magic to deal extra damage. Like, what is going on with some Russians? A breakthrough in the dementia research. Dementia is affecting more and more people, and it basically means that a person's ability to think, remember or to make decisions is damaged. I mean, they don't feel extreme pain or anything of that kind, so there are worse illnesses. But just imagine a person that you don't remember knowing telling you that they're your parents or even your children. Apart from that, this is very hard for the family and friends as well, since they remember the person. And yes, this is an example for a specific form of dementia, but it generally affects the everyday lives of tens of millions of people. Now, there was a breakthrough in the research of BV-FTD, which is also known as the behavioral variant of frontotemporal dementia, which is among the most common forms of dementia and fatal. This causes, for example, behavioral disinhibition, such as inappropriately approaching or touching strangers, and it can lead to a loss of manners. A breakthrough drug is said to be able to stop the disease in its tracks, and the scientists that developed this new medication even stated that it has the potential to even reverse some of the damage. So unfortunately, this drug isn't able to heal Alzheimer's dementia like I described in the beginning, but it could be used to prevent BV-FTD cases in the future. And as you heard, it could even be able to heal some of the damage that this illness does to the brain. But to understand that, we have to look at how the human body is affected and what causes these behavioral changes. So, according to the Mayo Clinic, dementia is caused by damage to or the loss of nerve cells and their connections in the brain. Depending on the area of the brain that is damaged, dementia can affect people differently and cause different symptoms. So, to start, people with FTD typically live 6 to 8 years with their condition, while most people die of problems related to the advanced disease. That makes BV-FTD one of the worst forms of dementia. This happens because BV-FTD patients have a build-up of tau protein in the brain. And how that happens is very complicated because it involves multiple enzymes and other organic structures in the brain. So the following is medical knowledge which is interesting but not essential to understand this topic. So if you don't want to hear these medical terms, you can skip to the next chapter, which is called A Breakthrough in the Dementia Research Part 2. Now, tau proteins basically help maintaining the stability of the central nervous system by stabilizing microtubules, which are a part of neurons. And neurons are the parts of your brain that pass on electrical impulses until they've reached their destination. So when a person suffers from BV-FTD, these tau proteins detach from the microtubules that they're supposed to be stabilizing and stick to other tau molecules, forming threads that eventually join to form tangles inside neurons. These tangles then block the neuron's transport system, which harms the synaptic communication between neurons. Therefore, your behavior or your memory can be affected by this. The new medication is a sodium selenate treatment that stops the disease in its tracks by reducing the tau production in the brain. Several studies were conducted to prove the promised results, and until now, this treatment has successfully stopped BV-FTD from getting worse. And right now, even more studies are conducted to see if that drug could even reverse some of the damage in the brain. But until then, there isn't much more to know about this. So I hope that this wasn't too boring, but a bit education can't be that bad, right? Will Sweden and Finland join the NATO? So we see what's happening in Ukraine right now, and of course other countries fear that they could be next. And right now it doesn't look like Russia's gonna have the resources to invade another country in the next decade. But for real, seeing that Russia's government doesn't even stop there makes it a much bigger threat than before. So it's understandable that countries like Sweden and Finland are considering joining the NATO as well. I mean, Finland even is a neighbor of Russia. Their common border is around 1,340 kilometers or 830 miles long. And if you think about it, this probably is the best time to join the NATO, because Russia has warned the EU not to expand the NATO any further to the east. And the fact that Ukraine wanted to join the NATO was one of the reasons why the Russians attacked. But during war, the Russian military is mostly occupied with their invasion. So this is the time where other nations like Sweden and Finland, for example, don't really have to fear any consequences if they join the NATO. I mean, yes, Russia cut off their gas for Finland, but compared to a war, this is a little price for joining the military alliance. Apart from that though, this probably surprised many people, since these countries had a long history of wartime neutrality and staying out of military alliances. But in the current situation, joining the NATO is probably one of the smartest things they could do. So they better take that opportunity, because if Russia gains back some military strength after the war, who knows what it'll do. These were the most important and funniest news from the past 2 weeks. If you've got any suggestions on topics that we missed out on, feel free to let us know in the comments. And once you're down there, please consider liking and subscribing, since that helps us out more than you could imagine. But now to this week's bonus fact. The wife of the French President Emmanuel Macron, Brigitte Macron, used to be his teacher. But this isn't even it. On top of that, he was a classmate of her daughter. They got married around 2 years after she divorced her husband, who was the father of her daughter.